Hi, this is Benita from Team Honeycomb. This is our team teaching. Today we will be going over Chapter 5, which is about persistent data. The question is, what is the relationship between content provider and SQLite database object? First, what is SQLite? SQLite is a relational database system. Android has chosen it because it is light, fast, and can store local persistent data. The content provider is the interface of the database. It can query, add, update, and delete data in the database. Actually, it can do this for any stored data system because content provider is used to basically share data between applications, and that is because applications by default cannot access each other's data. Now, content provider also allows this sharing of data using URI-based approach, which is similar to the URI of intents. It also uses an object called cursor, which is used to process SQLite database results set. So, each content provider exposes a unique content URI that identifies the content type it handle. And here's an example of that. Notice that some of the URI's purpose can return all the contents or one specific content. Okay, here we actually have an example of a content provider. It's called widget provider. You notice that widget provider, it extends a content provider. Also in this particular example, the content provider uses SQLite database. And here's also a continuation of that. I'll actually come back to these two slides as I get more in detail about content provider. Again, we see this before, but it bears good to repeat the points again. Content provider is basically, it provides a way of getting data from another activity, application, or component. The content providers have unique content URIs. Again, we've seen this table before. Okay, before utilizing a content provider, you must be able to import the provider. This can be somewhere pre-installed in Android or perhaps data from another activity. So below here are examples of if you were to utilize a content provider, you would have to import. And this particular example, you're using the built-in phone contact list, I think. Another one is the photos part of the Android. So now you want to know, how do you query a content provider? Well, you need three things. First, you need an URI that identifies the provider. You also need the names of the data fields that you want to receive, and also the data types of those fields. Okay, so to query a content provider, you can use either the content resolver.query method or the activity.manageQuery method. Both of these methods take in the same set of arguments and both return a cursor object. Here we have an example of using those method. In this particular example, they use the manage query, and also in this example, they are querying one specific query, and that is the context people and the person whose ID field is 23. Also to note that in this particular example, it has a null that you guys see here down here in the manage query. This is my person null, 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 null. So what null basically means here is pretty much says query all the data in that particular column. So now next one is making a content provider. So when you're making a content provider, you have to again extend the content provider class, and you also have to implement six abstract methods. You have to implement a query method, which returns data to the caller, an insert method, which inserts new data, update, again updates data, delete data, and get type, which is a method that returns a MIME type of data in the content provider. And also it also implements a onCreate method, which is called to utilize the provider. So if we go back to the previous slide, the one that I was going to go back to. Hold on. I'm going to go back to the first two slides. Go back. Okay, I think we're there. Okay, so we're back here again. You see that this widget provider this widget provider extends a content provider. You can also see that the database is being set up here, so the data is being defined and created and opened. Here you can see the onCreate method. And in this method, they made an open helper database open helper object, which pretty much helps sets up the database. And then here you see the get type method. In more detail, it's basically a method that uses the passing URI to determine if that URI's request is being supported. If it is, then it checks which type of data is being requested, and then it will return that MIME type. So we're going forward, as that's not all the example, because okay, so this is like the second part of the widget provider. Here you see the query method here, and this sets up the query and it's based on URI. And here down here, if you guys can go down, it says here this is the insert method, and here you would be able to like use the URI and be able to insert data into the database. You can also here update. This method here updates the database. And down here is the delete. So if you want to like delete a method or not method of data in a database, this method would do it. And because it has to be override because it's one of the 6 abstract methods. So now we're back to SQLite. The question is, how is SQLite database object used as a data store in Android? The SQLite database object is used as the main tool for opening database connections, executing SQL statements, and more. When a provider is used, this object is used to store and retrieve data that is handled by the content provider. The next question is, how is I/O implemented in Android? Well, it is usually implemented in 2 typical ways. That is to create and read files from within the application or from raw resource files. When creating files, you use a method from context, which is open file output, to get a file output stream. This will allow the stream to create a file and thus be stored at data/data/ the name of the package /file/ the file name. Once once the stream is open, you can edit and write as you would typically you would do in Java. And then once you're done, you flush it out, you close, and you're done with that part. Next, you'd be accessing the file. And the way you would access the file, so basically reading the file, is use a method from context again, but this time you'll use the method open file input, and you will get a open file input stream. And just like Java, you'll be able to edit and write the IO file, and then when you're done, you have to close and clean it up. Another way to put files into the directory of your application so it can be read and written on is by using something called an ADB tool. Typically, the ADB tool methodology is used during developmental stage, so you wouldn't actually use this when you're actually running it or publishing it. So you'll use this for when you're testing. So our last question is, what special considerations must be made, if any, to read and write SD cards? So first thing to consider is existence. You must first check to see if a SD card is present. If there is no SD card present, then you must have to go find and use something else, another storage mechanism. The next consideration is import. So when you import Java IO file classes, you're basically reading and writing to and from the SD card, and you use the same IO Java, like reading like the file input and the file output streams. So for using if you see the previous, when I talk about the file and reading and writing files, well, you would use that same methodology for the SD card. The third one consideration is location. So usually this is in the /SD card location, but sometimes that isn't so. There, sometimes when you plug in your phone or your handset, whatever, you won't be able to. It won't have that directory. But most of the time, it does. So it's best to use something called environment.get external storage directory method. This way, you can confirm the location of the SD card and avoid errors in your application. So that's pretty much all for Chapter 5. Thank you for listening and have a great day.